Hey y'all, my name is Hannah, and today I'm going to try to talk to you a little bit about my adoption story. My adoption story is not the stereotypical one. I was not adopted at a young age. I was not adopted into the traditional family. Um, but before I begin all that, I'm going to give you a little bit um, of my current situation. I am a single mom and currently working for a behavioral health institute in Kentucky. I work with 18 to 24-year-olds that are in a crisis situation, and that means homeless right now. So I run two different crisis shelters, and the way that things are set up there is that we take an intake of someone that is in that crisis situation, and then we give them a program of 3 months to get them pretty much on their feet until we can provide other housing on their own. It's a very rewarding job, and you will understand why I brought that up once I get into my story and why it's so rewarding for me. Um, my story. Uh, I can start back probably in first grade. Um, it was winter, and I remember my mom had dropped me off at school. At that time, I was in a traditional um, family setting. Um, my dad worked. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I was the oldest. I had a baby brother on the way. But one day I get a visitor at school. And I remember being called to the office, and I walked down the hallway, and there's a strange man standing at the end of the hallway with gifts and presents and balloons and all of these things, and I didn't think anything of it. Um, I didn't know him, so obviously it wasn't for me. Come to find out, all those gifts and things were for me. Um, he tells me that he's my dad, and all the gifts and stuff that he has given me, I cannot tell my mom where they came from. He asked me to lie. He asked me to tell her that they were from the school. I done that. I went home and done that, and then a couple days later, my mom goes to school to give a thank you for these things and to the teacher, and that's where it all began. So at the age of 6, I figured out that my dad, that I thought was my dad, it's not my dad. He was actually my stepdad. Um, that began a very traumatic time for me because the curiosity in me needed to know all the things. I needed to know who my real dad was, um, why this was kept from me, just so many questions. My stepdad was a very abusive, controlling person, and so he would not allow my mom to allow me to have a relationship with my biological father. So, um, very traumatic childhood from there on, very abusive. My stepdad was physically abusive to me, my mom. Um, it was to the point of I was never allowed, I wasn't allowed to speak. If we were all in the same car, if I was in the presence of my stepdad, I did not speak. I was not allowed to show any emotions. I was not allowed to cry. I was not allowed to be mad. I was just there. If I did do anything that showed any emotions, I was I was physically abused. Very bad. So once I started getting older, I would spend a lot of time at my cousin's house, which was on my stepdad's side. I never knew any of my family on any sides of my actual family. I had no idea, like I said, who my real father was, so obviously I didn't know that side of the family. My mom was not allowed to have a relationship with her family. My stepdad would not allow it, so I had no relationship there. So the only family that I had was my stepdad's side of the family. So anyway, I would go and spend the nights at my cousin's house. Me and him were super close. By the time I turned about 12, I noticed I started getting a lot of attention from my uncle. Unwanted sexual attention. And that progressed for 2 years, 3 years, to the point of it started out with just touching here and there to full-on rape. So I was the unwanted stepchild that was being abused in this family and was told not to tell because no one's going to believe me anyway. One of my other cousins eventually came to me and said that she was starting to get some really weird vibes from the same uncle. I couldn't allow it. I couldn't allow that to happen to her too. So I eventually told. When I told, my uncle shot himself and killed himself because he knew he was caught. And then all of that guilt and shame was put on me because I was told it was my fault that he had died. Again, a very traumatic childhood. By the time I was 16, I couldn't take living at home anymore. So I figured it was best to just live in a tent. And that's what I done. I grew up a tomboy. I grew up playing outside. I grew up camping. I grew up all the things. So I figured that would be a lot better to live in a tent than to live in the situation that I was in. So that's what I done. Eventually, Child Protective Services got word that that's where I was at, that I was living in a tent at a lake, and I was put into the system. I was put into foster care, and because I had no family, and I hadn't been in foster care long, and I got a phone call from my mom one morning, and I was getting ready for school, and it was super early, and she calls and she tells me, "Your dad passed away last night." Not knowing any other father, I thought that she meant my stepdad. I felt nothing. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel any of the grief that a person should feel. But then I found out that it was actually my real father who passed away. So that started a whole new thing, a whole new era of my life. Eventually, I went to his funeral, and I met some of my actual family. And then eventually, my grandmother, I was 17 at the time, and my grandmother on my biological father's side decided to adopt me. And for no reason whatsoever, get me out of the system. And she could have got me out of the system without adopting me. But she adopted me. She wanted full rights. She wanted me to live with her. She wanted to do all the things. And that's how I got adopted. And she was a little 80-year-old woman. And we pretty much took care of each other for a while. She passed away 2 years later after she had adopted me. And by that time I was out on my own for good and set up. I wasn't living in a tent. And that's my adoption story and how I got adopted. And the reason for this video is it's very therapeutic for me. Although I have talked to therapists, although I have talked to caseworkers and things like that, sometimes it's nice to write things down as I used to and go back and read it, and sometimes it's nice to make a video and share it, and hopefully someone else will share theirs and they will get the therapy that I get from just sharing my story. And so, yeah, that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed.